No one within the galactic community knew what to expect when the Ganzo began their invasion of human space all those years ago. Nor did anyone expect this most unlikely of outcomes. Up until that point, the Ganzo Empire was known both for its military might and its affinity for enslaving civilizations they believed were inferior to them. They were an arrogant race, as their entire civilization had the belief that they were the superior/dominant race in the galaxy. That the entire universe revolved around them, and all those who existed only did so to serve the Ganzo race. Needless to say, the Ganzo were not the most popular of factions within the galactic community. For centuries, they had sent their massive war fleets out into the galaxy to expand their territories and subjugate those who they saw as inferior, which was pretty much everyone they encountered. Ganzo's space consisted of numerous slave worlds, each one a subjugated world which was unfortunate enough to end up in the reach of the Ganzo fleets. Each one home to billions of slaves who toiled day and night to feed the ever-hungry Ganzo Empire, and all because they were seen as lesser creatures by their masters. By comparison, humanity was a relatively new faction within the galaxy. Their civilization only being discovered when a Calathi survey ship accidentally ended up in their star system after it had been disabled by a rogue meteorite and was forced to exit slipspace. At this point in their history, the humans had only just begun to leave their homeworld and explore their home system, setting up colonies on their moon, a planet which they called Mars, and numerous asteroids. In fact, it was one of these asteroid colonies which discovered the damaged Calathi ship, which had to have been a major shock to their civilization, as they had long since believed that they were the only ones in the universe. But unlike the Ganzo, the Calathi were more known as explorers than conquerors, and were quite excited by this discovery, as they had believed this region of space was devoid of any life. The rest, they say, was history. After the initial shock wore off, both the humans and the Calathi opened formal relations between their governments, and soon a technology exchange had begun. Which was a surprise, since humans were seen as primitive when compared to the wider galactic community. Just what could they offer to the Calathi? As it turned out, a lot. As it turned out, numerous plant species only found on the human homeworld turned out to have properties that were beneficial to Calathi, such as curing several deadly illnesses which existed in their civilization. As a result, humanity actually assisted them in creating several large agricultural facilities on the Calathi homeworld. Due as to provide them with these plants, they soon began to treasure, specifically the fruit known as oranges. As a result, the Calathi gave the humans access to faster-than-light travel by providing them with designs for slipspace engines. This not only allowed the humans to expand outside of their home system and establish more colonies, but begin trade with numerous other spacefaring civilizations, mine included, as coffee became a popular beverage among my people. It was not long before the humans became known for being expert merchants among the races. As their ever-growing merchant fleets began to visit other worlds to sell their wares to a population hungry for human items. Yet unlike other major trading groups, the humans did not seem to operate a massive naval force to protect their cargo ships. In fact, no one could ever remember seeing a human warship, the closest to these being some armed cargo ships, which acted as impromptu escorts for their freighters. Another strange thing was that despite the level of trade which now existed, none of the other races that traded with them were allowed near their home sectors. They would instead have to load and offload their cargo at one of several trade ports, which existed at the very edge of their territory. Obviously, this meant that the human control systems were not as well protected as one would assume, which is why they would not allow alien ships into their space. They would be too weak to fight them off. As such, the Ganzo soon saw the humans as their next conquest. They could easily conquer human space, thus expanding their territory, gaining more slaves, and most of all, eliminate a potential economic rival. In the human year of 2333, over 1,000 Ganzo warships and transport vessels thundered into human space, completely unopposed. Hours after this, the Primer of the Ganzo Empire announced his intentions to annex human space into their own and expand the reach of their nation. Many within the galaxy were applauded by this brash move, yet were not in any position to assist the humans. The Ganzo had the largest fleet within the known galaxy, and their ships were known to be quite powerful. Everyone expected the worst and believed that the new friends within the galactic community would be subjugated like numerous others before. Just another easy win for the Ganzo Empire. But then a week went by, then 2 weeks, then 3, and there was no word from either the human government or the Ganzo. They had both gone silent, which was odd seeing that the Ganzo had a habit of boasting about their victories. But the Empire was strangely silent about this recent operation. But on the 4th week of the invasion, something strange began to happen. Transmissions soon began to be picked up from human space. Transmissions that seemed to be coming from the Ganzo ships. Transmissions of Ganzo warriors screaming and desperately calling for help, only for them to be cut off abruptly. Yet the Empire remained silent, only making statements that those supposed transmissions were nothing more than human tricks. Yet more and more of these disturbing transmissions were being picked up. Transmissions that were suggesting that something terrible was happening to the invading fleet. Then, by the 5th week, an event would occur that would forever shatter the Ganzo's image within the galaxy. Ganzo warships soon began to appear on the human border after exiting slipspace, their hulls showing signs of extreme damage, as they slowly made their way out of human space and back to their homeworld. Others were missing entire sections of their hulls, as if something had clearly sliced them off and exposing their interiors to space. These vessels were ultimately abandoned by their crews and left adrift. There was no way these ships would have been able to make it back home. Just what in the name of the creators had happened to them? But then another event would occur that would answer everyone's questions. Massive warships of unknown design, hundreds of them, suddenly began to appear within Ganzo space and attack many of their fleet facilities. Their many railguns and mass divers tearing apart the Ganzo ships as if they were organic paper, while their larger space stations and shipyards vanished in nuclear hellfire. It was only then the galaxy knew just what was going on and who was responsible. As it turned out, the humans did have a massive war fleet of their own, with ships which were miles long and armed to the teeth with primitive railguns, missile pods, and extremely powerful beam cannons. The Holo network soon became flooded with images of human warships ripping apart the Ganzo ships. While their ground forces were being welcomed by the newly liberated slave populations, the humans may have been small in the galactic power scale, but their teeth were proving to be both mighty big and sharp. Eventually, the human warships arrived at the Ganzo homeworld and began to surround the planet. There were hundreds of them, thousands of ships of every type and model one could imagine, surrounding the planet and pointing directly at the surface. The Ganzo Imperial fleet, once the most powerful and feared among the other races, now only existed in memory, as most of their vessels had either been destroyed, damaged beyond repair, or captured by the advancing human fleet. The ones that did remain were quick to surrender, though to be fair, was quite possible the best decision they could have made at that point. It was not long before another transmission was received by the galactic community, this time coming from the Imperial Palace on the now blockaded world. It was the Primer, begging for assistance from anyone who heard her calls, asking for someone, anyone, to help them fight off the human threat, as she called it. But the Ganzo had made a lot of enemies by this point in their history. Many enemies, some of whom had covertly assisted the humans with their offensive into Ganzo territory. Yet somehow the Primarch still believed that some of the races would help them for some reason. After this, another transmission was detected, this time from the human flagship. "This is Admiral Patrick Morrison, commander of the United Earth Defense Force's 7th Fleet. Your fleets have been destroyed, and you have lost all of your slave worlds. Your planet is surrounded, and there is no escape. On the authority of the United Earth government, we demand that you surrender unconditionally and lay down your arms. Failure to do so in the next 24 hours will be seen as a hostile act, and we will respond accordingly." That was almost 50 years ago, and the Ganzo Empire is now no more. They had no choice but to accept the human demands to avoid total destruction, or at least that was what they believed would happen. The empire that had existed for centuries was dismantled by humanity, their territory carved up, and given back to the world that had once been subjugated. It was also a strange twist of fate, that the Ganzo star system and their homeworld was eventually annexed by the humans. Their government also being replaced by a military governor, who now supervised a new civilian Ganzo government. Though this government did have a level of autonomy, they still had to answer to the military governor, as he or she had the power to veto any decision they made. The Ganzo no longer had an empire or fleet to scare the other races, while their arrogance seemingly evaporated the moment the United Earth flag was raised over the palace. Yet no one wept for the fallen civilization, as they soon began to be subjugated to centuries of pent-up hatred from the other races. So what happened to that easy win? Was a common phrase used to taunt their species, as the Ganzo soon found themselves being labelled as the trash of the galaxy wherever they went. As for humanity, they soon resumed trading with the other races after the war ended. Their massive cargo ships once again visible on the space lanes and visiting planets on the regular. Although this time their warships were more frequently seen outside of their territory, usually making goodwill visits to friendly governments, or even training with other space navies. Yet humanity never boasted about their victory over the Ganzo, nor were they quick to remind anyone of this fact. They seemed to be more interested in building healthy relationships with the other emerging galactic powers, and establishing trade deals. Yet to this day, the humans have refused to let any vessels into their home systems. Though after what happened to the Ganzo fleet, no one was in a hurry to do so.